What's up, you guys? In this video, it's going to be a May and June market update. Now that May has finished, we're going to be looking at the statistics of what happened in May. How did home sales fare? What happened with the number of listings on the market? Were properties selling? How much were they selling for? We're going to look at all of that information here in this video. We're going to talk about what this means for you as a buyer, a seller, or an investor here in this market. This market is shifting pretty rapidly, so you want to make sure that you're in the know about what's happening in the market so you have a good expectation of what to expect. The thing about it is if you're working with a realtor, they may only see 5, 10, 15, maybe 30 or 40 transactions in a whole year, even though there's thousands of transactions that happen every single month. So for me, even though I do a ton of business helping a lot of you guys who reach out to me from these videos, I only see a small portion. That's why I think it's so critical for not only myself, but also for you guys to kind of watch the market statistics and really get a feel for what's happening, because that's really the only way to know what's exactly happening in the market. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the statistics here. And then we're also going to talk about what the market is actually reflecting, because the statistics are going to be data from 1, 2, 3 months ago. But I'm going to talk about what I'm actually seeing out in the field. I'm showing houses every day. I'm writing offers almost every single day. And I want to share a little bit about that with you. Let's jump into this video here and take a look at this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in just a little bit so you guys can see this a little bit better. All right, so you know that I love to look at this information. So in May, we saw 3,944 sales, which is almost steady with what we saw in April and March of 2022. Now, this is the search criteria here is just the state of Utah. So this is all homes across the whole entire market. There's no criteria. This is condos, townhomes, single family homes, mansions, everything, right? So across the market, 3,944 sales, which is pretty steady from the last couple of months. If we go back and just look at like what happened last year, from March into April and into May, we did see a pretty big jump here to 4,300 sales in April, but then only 4,100 in May before climbing back to 5,000 in June. And if we look at 2020, we did see a jump up in May to 4,000 sales. So this does vary by the year, but if we go back to 2019, which is kind of before the market went crazy, going from April to May, we do expect to see a pretty big jump in the number of sales. In fact, for this month, we saw almost about 850 sales in addition to what we saw in April. So almost 850 more sales. So that's the number of sales that happened. We didn't see quite as many sales happen, and I think that's reflective of low inventory in the market, interest rates being expensive, all of that stuff. Here's the pricing information. So this left column is the original listing price on a median basis, which is, average. I think median and average are actually calculated slightly differently, but the median is 523,000, but the median sales price compared to that listing price was at 538,000, almost 539,000. So this is still 103% above the original listing price. So if you're making an offer on a house at 500,000, you can expect to pay 3% more than that to actually get the home. Now, this is just across the board. And again, this is information from closings that happened in May, which means that these houses went under contract maybe the end of March or very likely in April in order to close in that May timeframe. So that was right as the market was starting to shift pretty heavily, right as interest rates are going up. So this is kind of the start of some of this important information that I think we're going to see. And I'm going to show you two other sets of statistics here in just a second that are going to show you exactly what you need to know based on the price range that you're actually looking at. I think for this information in June, here's a shocker, right? The original list price has still gone up by another $1,000 on a median basis, and the sales price is still above that, right? So even though the market has shifted, it's cooled off, we're still seeing homes sell for above the listing price so far here in June. And those are contracts that were written in April or even the beginning of May. So 521 sales, that's off to a good start there. The last thing I want to look at here is just this last column, which says 666. That's days on market. So days on market has not shifted at all. We haven't seen any changes there, but we do currently sit at 8 days on market for the month of June. So something to kind of note there for this month. Now, let's jump over here and take a look at these statistics. So this is, you can see my search criteria here is across the whole state of Utah, but I've capped it out at homes that are less than $500,000. So if we come back down here, you can see that the number of home sales in this price range under 500K has been dropping pretty steadily by about 100 each month over the last couple months. This is a little bit of an interesting scenario because, again, we're seeing that the median price, list price, is at 400,000, but homes are selling for about 420,000, which is mostly flat from the last couple of months, still 5% above the asking price. Now, here in June, because we saw 3 months of data here where, let's say you've got a condo and it's selling for 400,000, you might be looking at this thinking, oh, back here in March, I would have listed at 400,000 because that's what the data from February said as far as closed sale volume. So you're listing at 400,000, then you get 3 months of closings at 417, 422, 420, and people start thinking, hey, let's list at 425. And sure enough, homes are selling for 425, at least for the first little bit here in the month of June. So we are seeing that start to cool off. Again, it's always tough to use this June data just because the month is still in progress. So it's not 100% accurate. So you do have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, but that's something worth mentioning there just to kind of keep in mind. Again, days on market is still very, very low. Now, the last thing I want to show you here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how this affects you and kind of what you need to know. This is going to be, again, the state of Utah, list price at least 500,000 and at most 1 million. So this is all homes between 500K and $1 million. And this is really where we're seeing the big shifts in the market. So for the month of March, we are 4% above the asking price on average. Month of April, we're at 3%. Month of May, we're only at 1%. So this is a pretty big change, even though we've got 3 months of solid comparable data here showing that on a median basis, homes, in this price range are selling about 650. We're seeing that information hold steady here for the month of June. So this is kind of what I was talking about over the past couple months, saying, hey, I think home prices are really going to kind of flatten out, and I think we're going to see we're not going to see big price appreciations, but we're also not going to see price drops. Or let me rephrase that. We will see price drops, but we're not going to see the market come down as a whole that drastically. Now, the interesting thing here is that actually for this price range across the whole state, median sales prices were pretty high last spring, right? This is what happens in the spring in most markets is we go March, April, May, and we see sales prices go up, 650 here, 650, 645, and then it actually declined a little bit as we went into winter. So this is actually a bigger drop than I expected, down to about 630. So that's, $20,000, which is roughly, I think that's like maybe 4% there. And so that's pretty interesting to see that it did decline, not necessarily that it was, something out of the ordinary, because that generally does happen in the winter months. Less people want to move, so there's less demand, but interest rates were so low at that point that it's kind of surprising that home prices didn't continue to increase during that time frame. So I think that's a little bit of an anomaly, but interesting data nonetheless. Again, days on market is still relatively the same, 6 days on market, but we are creeping up to 9 days on market here in the month of June. And sales prices are remaining pretty flat here. So 649 for the list price on a median basis, selling for 650. So we are seeing that start to come down. We're seeing that start to level off. I would not be surprised to see this drop down to 640, 630, maybe 620 as we go through the summer months here. We'll have to see what happens. I think it's really going to depend on the interest rates and what happens with those. So we've covered the data here. Now let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the market here today. So the information that we looked at, like I said, it covers everything from the last 1, 2, 3 months. We're looking historically at that data. For any closings that happened in May, those homes went under contract in late March or April in order to close there in May. So that's looking at information about how the buyer sentiment was back in late March, early April. So with that information, that has now changed, right? Now that we're looking at June, the buyer sentiment has really changed. When I go out there and I'm representing a buyer through the buying process, we are finding that we've got a lot more inventory to choose from. We're finding that we're able to negotiate better terms. We're finding that we're able to really figure out the best way to approach the offer with the buyer and actually go through that process and get them a favorable deal. This is not something that we've had over the last couple of months. This is something that's been really difficult to do if you're a buyer in the market, but now it is getting significantly easier. So although we haven't seen prices come down, which I know a lot of buyers would hope for, we are at least seeing a lot of leverage shift back to the buyer side, which I think is incredibly important in order to have a healthy market. The market's just been insane lately. And, if you're a seller in the market, yeah, sure, you're going going to love it because your home's selling for a lot more than you thought it would. But if you're a buyer, it's been really tough. Same thing on the seller side, right? I've got a number of people who are selling their homes here locally, and we're all kind of seeing the same thing. You're sitting on the market for a week, maybe 2 weeks. I've even had some for 3 or 4 weeks over the past month or two. And they kind of sit for a minute until you get a buyer to come in and be willing to pay for that. And that's really, it's kind of funny because like 3, 4, 5 years ago, that was totally normal. If you weren't sitting on the market for at least 2 to 3 weeks, it was kind of like, oh, hey, you priced the home too low, right? If you sell in the first couple of days, you price the home too low for what it's worth. But now, because the market's been so crazy for the last couple of years, sellers are kind of expecting, hey, we need to list the home and we need to sell it the next day, right? But that's just not the reality of the market that we're in, and that's not really what's normal. So the market that we're in now for sellers, I think, is a lot more normal. If you're under that $500,000 price range, you can still expect your home to sell fairly quickly. If you're in that 500 to $1 million range, I think it's going to move a little bit slower, right? And if you go $1 million plus, it's going to be even worse, right? Homes are sitting on the market for longer, days on market is longer, and they're not selling for full price like they were, 6 or 12 months ago. So it just, the data continues. I know we didn't look at information for $1 million plus, but the data continues in that price range. So if you're a seller, don't get freaked out. This is normal for the market. It's okay to be on the market for 1, 2, 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks. Maybe you have to think about a price drop, but just be patient. That's something I can't stress enough. And, the last thing I want to talk about is investors. If you're an investor in this market, this is a really interesting time. Before we do that, I do want to mention that, hey, if you're making a move here to Utah or you already live here and you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, make sure to reach out to me. Call, text, or email anytime. I love hearing from you guys. I've had people literally from all across the world reach out to me, and people here that live, 3 blocks away from me reach out, which is really pretty cool to hear from you guys. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to help you with your real estate needs if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest. So the last thing I want to talk about is investors, right? If you're an investor in this market, it is really tough to find cash flow, right? If you're financing the property, it is going to be really hard to get a cash on cash return and to get a cap rate that makes sense in this market because interest rates have gone up so substantially. I know that cap rate doesn't take into account the interest rates necessarily, but it does affect your bottom line return, right? So because interest rates have gone up, now you're not only dealing with high prices, but now you've also got high interest rates, and that's making it really tough to find any type of cash flow. I also think that we're a little bit at the top of the market, at least for the next 6 to 12 months. I don't expect to see prices jump up substantially. So if you're going into it thinking, hey, I'm buying this place for 600, you can't realistically expect it to be 650 by the end of the year. I just don't think that's going to happen. So you really want to try to buy that $600,000 home for 580 or for 570 or 550, even if you can. That's really what's going to determine a really good deal. I personally am still believing that interest rates within the next 2 to 4 years will come back down to about the 4 to 4.5% range. I don't think they'll get as low as they were. Who knows? You never know. But I do think they'll come back down from where they're at. For investment loans, you're looking at about 6% right now. I do think we can get that back down under 5%, which is going to help your cash flow numbers if you decide to refinance at some point in the future. So that's kind of where the market's at. I think if you're an investor in this market, just be patient, wait for the right deal, wait for something to come up that looks like there's value add in the property where you can fix it up a little bit, add some equity into it, and also be able to command a high rent because we are seeing rents go up substantially. I know we didn't cover that in this video, but rents are going up, and it's pretty crazy to see what people are charging for some rental properties out there right now. So that kind of gives you an overall view of what's happening in the market. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, share it with a friend or a family member who might also enjoy this video. And yeah, I'd really appreciate it. Reach out to me if you're looking at buying, selling, or investing in real estate. And with that said, catch you guys in the next one.